The Bible tells us to love our neighbors and also to love our enemies, probably because generally they are the same people. This is one of my favorite quotes from G.K. Chesterton.
And it's a great one, too. How can you apply this to communication, marital communication specifically? The first thing to do is to really look at ourselves. Look at ourselves in communication. How do I look when I communicate with my spouse? It's really easy to look at my spouse, his way of communicating, but how do I look? That because we often, see the other person. Well, he's raising his voice, so I'm just not going to talk. I'm just going to ignore him. I'm just going to be quiet. Okay, but is that loving? Is that what Christ calls us to do? To love, love our neighbor, love our enemy. At that point, if he's raising his voice, then he becomes my enemy in a sense, right? And so how do I react? Do I react lovingly? The ideal is to not shut down, to not stop talking, to not yell back, right? So again, we need to look at ourselves. And so when I look at myself, what do I see? Do I see myself shutting down? Do I see myself being disrespectful? Do I see myself being rude, right? All of those things are not loving, which is what Christ calls us to do, what the Bible says is the right thing to do.
Right. Or for me, do I see what, the point I'm trying to make or the thing that I feel is not getting heard? Do I feel like that's more important than our relationship, right? Our marriage.
Yeah. So a great obstacle, and you want to be aware of this, a great obstacle is what your spouse is doing. If they're not being loving, well, you might think, well, do I need to be loving then? Well, of course, because
Yes.
Jesus doesn't say, love your neighbor and love your enemy unless they're being mean to you. He doesn't say that, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't say, well, if you have a good reason, you don't have to. He doesn't say that. He just says, plain and simple, love your enemy. And that's the way he lived, right? He didn't say, when he was on the cross, he didn't say, okay, well, you guys are going to be crucified next. He didn't act disrespectfully or in a bad way. And you see that all throughout his life. So again, it's something that we need to look at ourselves and see, how am I acting? How am I reacting? So ideally, if my husband, acts in a rude manner or my spouse in a manner that's not pleasing to me, that hurts me, ideally, I would say, that really hurts. And I'd say it gently, it really hurts when you do this, but I really want us to resolve this and, basically speak kindly, lovingly, gentle, the way I want to be spoken to.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, hearing that something really hurts, the last thing I want to do is hurt you, right? And so it's so much easier to get on the right track than being told, hey, you dirty rotten so-and-so, you are doing this again or whatever, right? That's less easy to work with.
And honestly, it actually works really well because I have seen myself, I'm the one who raises her voice. He doesn't tend to raise his voice, but I'll raise my voice. And when I see him speak to me lovingly after I've done that, it's very noticeable. I say, oh my goodness, wow, he just spoke to me so gently. And I see the contrast with my own action. And I say, okay, I need to tone it down, or I need to not be rude because he's not being rude, right? Yeah. So it really works well.
Yeah. So that self-awareness is important, right? Sometimes we're on autopilot and, unless we make a deliberate effort to see what we're doing, take a step back and look at ourselves, we're not aware of these things. We might not realize we have room for improvement, even though we do. So we invite you to take a look at yourself. Next time you're in the heat of an argument, are you so focused on fighting your enemy that you don't realize you're also fighting your closest neighbor? So give that a shot. Let us know how it goes, and we'll see you next time.
See you then.